street with troops on almost every corner. And there's little sign of the Buddhist monks who led the pro-democracy protests and are now confined to their monasteries or in jail.
There are about 15,000 troops, I think, in Rangoon at the moment. So they have managed for the moment to sort of crush the life out of the protests.
Neocolonialism opposed the interference of the external elements.
The Burmese regime's also determined to win the propaganda war, with state TV broadcasting more pro-government rallies. But in a sign the regime is paying some heed to international pressure, UN envoy Ibrahim Gambari has been allowed to meet detained opposition leader Aung San Suu Kyi. However, he's yet to see the ruling general Tan Shui and has extended his mission in the hope of doing so. The full extent of last week's violent crackdown is still unknown, but more evidence is emerging. Pro-democracy activists have released more pictures of the crackdown, including these, apparently showing the body of a monk killed in the uprising.
My sources are telling me that at least 200 people have died in the last week of violence. It could be higher than that. My fear is it is going to get worse before we see some kind of solution.
And new pictures of the apparent shooting of a Japanese photographer in Rangoon have also surfaced. The regime had claimed his death was accidental, but Japan now says it's considering stern measures, although so far it's stopped short of imposing sanctions. This Burmese protester who fled the crackdown and is now in Bangkok has told CNN that he witnessed the shooting.
And you saw the man being shot?
Yeah, he down.
He fell down?
The witness says he's afraid to return to Burma, and he's likely to be just one among a new wave of Burmese refugees seeking sanctuary in neighbouring Thailand. Vesna Nasor, World News Australia.
Later in the programme, we'll talk to So Ong, the Foreign Affairs spokesperson for Burma's pro-democracy umbrella group.
Last week, under intense international pressure, China agreed to exercise its influence over its traditional ally Burma. It's urged a peaceful resolution to the protests and the promotion of democracy.
China, though, is caught between a rock and a hard place in dealing with the Burmese regime because it can't be seen on the one hand to be letting down a traditional friend, while on the other supporting forces of democratic opposition.
The nation's envoy has met Burma's top military leader Tan Shui in the nation's isolated capital to express global outrage over the crackdown on pro-democracy protests. But the military regime insists it was not to blame for the deadly crackdown on mass protests. It claims political opportunists backed by world powers are responsible.
After 3 days of waiting, the UN envoy Ibrahim Gambari was finally granted an audience with military leader General Tan Shui. His meeting is to express international concern over the Burmese military's deadly reaction to last week's protests. But speaking at the UN General Assembly, Burma's foreign minister made his country's position clear.
The situation would not have deteriorated had the initial protest of the small group of activists against the rise in fuel price had not been exploited by political opportunists. They sought to turn the situation into a political showdown, aided and abetted by some powerful countries.
Free, free, free Burma! The voice of dissent against the military regime may have been gagged in Burma, but across the world it's getting louder. Exiled Buddhist monks and protesters gathered outside the UN headquarters in New York. Similar scenes outside Burmese embassies in London, Nepal, Israel and India. But in Burma's main city, Rangoon, the streets were ominously quiet. The monks who led the uprising now either jailed or besieged in their monasteries. It's estimated that some 6,000 demonstrators are being held at makeshift detention centres.
There is a reason to believe that a lot of them will have been taken away for questioning and detention, and possibly much worse.
Authorities say 10 people were killed as the protests were dispersed. Diplomats and activists claim the number is much higher. Australian Foreign Minister Alexander Downer has called the crackdown brutal, and he's rejecting Burma's nomination of an army general as the new envoy to Canberra.
We will not be accepting anybody from the military regime in Burma as a representative of Burma in Australia. That is completely unacceptable.
SBS contacted the Burmese embassy for their reaction and were told in a curt reply that they would not be commenting. Emma Hannigan, World News Australia.
Well, many people are trying to flee Burma. SBS understands this could include the family of military leader Than Shwe. Reports suggest they may have arrived in the capital of Laos last Thursday on a private jet. Less fortunate are the tens of thousands of refugees in camps along the Thai border.
Across the valley, Burma, a country that is now almost sealed from the watching world. Almost. For these images have just emerged of the huge protests which took place in Burma's second city, Mandalay, and which helped prompt the bloody crackdown. This the peaceful defiance which shook the regime. And on the Thai-Burma border, stories of what is happening inside are filtering out. We met these monks fleeing from a town near the border. For them, Burma has become a state of terror.
I was not involved, but they are arresting hundreds of monks. They are indiscriminate arrest. They are shooting at us. I had to flee.
So what do you think is going to happen in Burma now?
It's getting a lot worse.
Thailand is already host to more than 150,000 Burmese refugees in crowded camps like this along the border. Many fled the last big crackdown 20 years ago. And they follow closely the news from Burma. An end to military rule would mean that 72-year-old Pu Di could go home and not die in a refugee camp.
Besides then, I have to...
Ong Ong was a student leader once, and he despairs at the crushing of the latest uprising.
They kill, they arrest, or they capture, everything they can do. We are just like ants, A-N-T, ants.
They kill you like an ant?
Yes.
To understand what motivated the latest uprising, you only need to enter this border clinic. Here the poor and beaten of Burma come for the aid they are denied at home. Some are victims of violence, others of the poverty and disease created by a corrupt dictatorship. For these people, the protest provided a flicker of hope. But what they fear now is that they, and the cause of a Burma free from fear, will be forgotten by the international community once again. That, sadly, is what history has taught them to expect.